What I'm going to do is to test the idea or the notion of non-territorial autonomy with the status of Muslims in Greece, and I think this gives us would give some insights about the extent of territorial or non-territorial autonomy. So I'm not going to say or to repeat again because we know very well what non-territorial autonomy is. So the key element here, of course, is the group rights or the collective entity. So a minority, in our case, a Muslim group of people, but they can be seen as a group vis-a-vis the state policies and the state law. So always, of course, religion has some ethnic affiliations behind it. As regards old Islam or new Islam, so I make this distinction because in Greece it's very obvious. So old Islam regards the historical minorities, and the new Islam regards the Muslim immigrants who came in Greece in the past 30 years. So that's why Greece is a Balkan state. The connection to Islam or to a post-Ottoman region makes history mattering for as far as legal status is concerned. So Greece has been established in 1830 after a revolution against the Ottoman Empire, as many other Balkan states. In 1881, we have the first legal framework as far as the Muslim communities of Thessalia, central Greece now, is concerned. So we have a legal framework by international treaties, one of the cases, the first cases in Europe to have such a legal framework. And then 1913, after the Balkan Wars. And then 1923, just reminds you these milestones. We have the end of the Turkish-Greek War and the first population exchange in history, governed by international law between Greece and Turkey. So Muslims from Greece had to leave Greece to Turkey, and Christians from Turkey had to leave Turkey and settle in Greece. However, there were exceptions. So these exceptions, like the Muslims of Thrace, have been governed by the Treaty of Lausanne under the minority, as we call minority protection. However, and this is very important, and I want to link with the previous presentation, a Christian state such as Greece, and the same happened to Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Romania, in the same period of time, the protection of Muslims was under the legacy of the Millet system in a reverse scheme. So within a predominantly Christian state, the Muslims and the Jewish communities were granted a special status which in the times of the beginning of the 20th century was very, very likely to remind us what was the Millet system. Of course, it was not exactly the Millet system. That's why I call it Neo-Millet. It was a remnant of the Ottoman past. So the Ottoman legacy was very convenient for the Christian states to reverse it and to make it matching to what was under the auspices of the League of Nations in that times, to name it protection of minorities. So we have a pre-modern with a modern system of protection of minorities. So in that map, you can see these small numbers represent the Muslim communities in Greece before the population exchange of 1923, and then only Thrace, so the northeastern part of Greece, who were exempt from the population exchange, remained in Greece as a minority under the protection of this Neo-Millet system or minority protection. In the southern eastern part of Greece, so the Dodecanese Islands, you know, where I guess the island of Rhodes, where is the 44 number, After 1947 and the latest annexation of a Greek territory to Greece, of a territory to the Greek, modern Greek state, we have a small community of Muslims also. But here, and this is important to see, we don't have the same legal status protecting the Muslims of roads and coasts. We'll talk about later. So the legal protection, so the special rights granted to the Muslims of race have, first of all, a reference to personal autonomy. So we could say that it's a kind of non-territorial autonomy. However, because there is still a minority within a Greek Orthodox majority, even in Thrace, so it's 1/3 of the population. They have their own institutions, and there is a strict territorial limitation. So if you go outside the region, you lose, and you are a Muslim, you lose your special rights. So we have a condition of territoriality to this personal autonomy. So that makes us understanding already that we have a non-territorial autonomy, but with a territoriality. So who belongs to this Muslim community? And this is very interesting because we go back to this biological origin of belonging, which is very contradicting, and I think is even sometimes against the legal principle of equality, that to track down the people who are today Muslims. So in order to be recipients of special rights or minority protection, have to prove that they are descendants, so it's the 4th or 5th generation of those who were exempt from the population exchange of 1923. So the situation is quite complicated. So we have community rights and of course individual rights. Let's say the personal status is very important here because you have the role of the Mufti, not as a kind of religious leader, but the Mufti is also a judge, and we have talked about this. We have community schools, so here we have a community, purely community rights, teaching Islam as a religious force and teaching also the Turkish language. And then you have the Waqf, so the community properties, so that belong or they have a straight link to the community. So again, we have the question, who belongs to the community to be the recipient of these special rights? Of course, all this legal framework is well linked to the political situation. So or Greek-Turkish antagonism over the minority is always present from the beginning of the story a century ago up to date. Second, Sharia law is applied by the 3 Mufti courts in Thrace, always was a tool for control, and that's why we have a paradox that Greece wanted to preserve Sharia law courts in order to control, through the jurisdiction of the Muftis, the minority, and on the other hand, Turkey, as a secular state, until recently only, of course, tried to persuade Greece to abolish Sharia courts. Of course, in the past 13 years, through the more Islamic Turkey now, the situation has changed. And of course, the Mufti as a political leader is an important figure that is influenced by the Greek governments or by Turkish governments. And we have a crisis in 1990 about this, so I don't have the time to explain. So the second group of Muslims, let's say in Greece, is New Islam, so migrants that came to Greece as immigrants or refugees since the late 1980s from the Palestine, let's say, until more recently from Afghanistan and Syria and other countries for political or other reasons. Here you see the main countries of origin of these people, who mostly pass Greece, but some of them, more than say 100 or maybe 200,000 people, stayed in Greece. And for them, we don't have any special rights, but we have the general fundamental universal rights regarding religion. And this important mixture of rights again. So there was a huge discussion about having a mosque in Athens, and only recently we have a mosque. So the administration council of this mosque in Athens comprises the representatives of the communities, which of course kind of absurd because we've got so many ethnic or national communities of Muslims in Greece. Who is going to be there? Finally, an imam was selected from the Moroccan community. And the third category regards the Muslims of the Dodekanis Islands, of Rhodes and Kos, who were not under the Lausanne Treaty. So they have some special rights, like schools until 1972 only, not anymore. They have a mufti, but they don't have a port, so they don't have Sharia applied there. But they have mosques and cemeteries and waqfs linked to the community. So we have kind of semi-led to non-minority situation. So if we can see these categories of different Muslim groups and the special rights or non-rights, you see that we have a specific and important differences. All of them are Muslims, but some Muslims have special rights. Even they are Greek citizens, so we have a divide between Greek citizens and non-Greek citizens, but still we have a very big divide between Thrace as a territory, where the Treaty of Lausanne is applicable, and non-Thrace, the rest of Greece, where others have some rights, specifically in the Dodekanis Islands, and then non-rights, non-specific rights for the rest of the Muslims. Okay, so we have different categories regarding Muslims or Islam in Greece. So the legacy of, let's say, millet was preserved only in Thrace, some elements in the Dodekanis, and nowhere else. So the Molas Ali case we have discussed in the previous conference in Belgrade was very important here because the court, I'm not going to go into details because I think we don't have the time, but the court of Strasbourg 2 years ago said that if someone wants to opt out from being under a specific minority protection status, has a freedom to do so. So everybody is free to be under the minority protection or to be under the general human rights law. And this was very, very important because for another paradoxical reason, the Greek courts, even the High Court of Greece, attempted in the past 30 years to keep Muslims, even without wanted, within the special law of, in that case, of Sharia law. So this is what the court said, but refusing members of a religious minority the right to voluntarily opt for and benefit from ordinary law amounts not only to discriminatory treatment, but also to a breach of a right of cardinal importance in the field of protection minorities. That is to say, the right to free self-identification. So here if you bring back to mind what is NTA or non-NTA is very important. Not because here territorial limitation doesn't mind, but being under a collectivity and special rights, or being at the same time being out, so having two options is very important in our discussion. And of course, here again, we have this overlapping of general rights according to the Greek Constitution and the European Convention of Human Rights, so the broader European legal framework, and some minority specifically rights in practice. So the right to association is very, very important here, shaping general and special rights and NTA. I will give you just an example that the Turkish Union of Xanthi and in others versus Greece also cases dealing with the associations of Muslims of race with a strong Turkish affiliation were denied by the Greek courts to have their association allowed to exist in Greece. So they appealed to the Court of Strasbourg, and the Court of Strasbourg said no, no matter the ethnic affiliation or religious affiliation exists, they have the right to be as all other associations in Greece. But of course, behind this contradiction, there is a strong political idea from the Greek judges that they wouldn't tolerate the existence of Turkish. So the national affiliation is very important here, overlapping with Muslim. So the main idea of this presentation and this discussion is that the legal accommodation of Islam in Greece attempts to balance personal autonomy with territoriality on the basis of citizenship. So we have here this dichotomy between Greek citizens and aliens. So, and the schemes here are asymmetric. As I said, there are three categories: Muslims of race, Greek citizens, Muslims of the Dodecanese Islands, Greek citizens, and then aliens all over Greece. So here, on this political legal canvas, ideological antagonism between the community of citizens and the community of the nation affects the position of Muslims in Greece in a fragmented and incoherent way. And the challenge for law and policy now is to consolidate a global approach for the treatment of these multifaceted Muslim communities on the basis of justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Konstantinos. It was very interesting presentation. We really enjoyed. Does anyone have a question from the audience? Yes, we have two questions. And first, Professor Ivan Adolowski have a question for you.
Hello, Konstantinos. Thank you very much for your presentation. I know you could not make it to Budapest, but we are very thankful for your presentation online. I had the privilege to read your paper, but I've got two particular questions. I hope you can hear me. First,
not very well though, but okay, we'll try to understand.
Maybe you can come here. He will just wait.
I'll come closer. Can you hear me now?
Better.
Okay. So the first question is, what if a Muslim from any part of Greece moves to the area of Thrace? Can he join the community and enjoy the rights? Or who is it, or how is it determined that he has the rights or not? Because you mentioned that the state has this authority to trace ancestry or sort of prove whether he will be entitled to, or she, to this right. So how is this organized? I mean, how can this be traced and authorized, and who does this? And the second question is the significant role of mufti that you mentioned. I think you hinted at the fact that somehow the state would like to control the muftis or the selection of muftis because of their important role. So what kind of autonomy do communities have? How are muftis elected? And to which extent do you think the state interferes in this, especially in the context of the attempts of Turkey trying to do the same, I suppose, and namely to have influence over the leaders of the community. Thank you.
Please.
To reply now or waiting? So, starting from your second, the Mufti, in the first, after from the beginning of the story of 1923, was selected upon an agreement between the elite of the minority, the Greek government, and the Turkish government. So for life term. So, solved the problem in the 1920s. The Muftis passed away, of course, after 30, 40 years. So in the late 40s, we had a second generation of Muftis. So they did the same thing. So unofficially, they made an arrangement, and then we had a third generation of Muftis, late 80s, and then we had a break. I mean, they didn't manage to find the Muftis. And then the Greek law changed, and they said, we will appoint the Muftis. And we did always, without agreement. And then they appointed the Muftis, and the Turkish, let's say, influence was in a way that some Muslims in Thrace elected their own Muftis. That's why we have these parallel Muftis. So we have the appointed by the state Muftis who have the jurisdictional authority, and we have another two Muftis who are in parallel. And there's a complicated story because it was criminalized, the activity of the parallel Muftis, but anyway, now that's why we have two. So there is no election. And the argument here is that when the Muftis are also acting as judges, you cannot have a judge who is elected. This is very important in European framework, legal framework. That's why now, again, we are in an impasse. We have a fourth generation of appointed Muftis, and we have another two elected, so-called elected, where they don't have any important, they have a very important role, but unofficial role in the minority. So we have the pro-Greek government Muftis, and we have the pro-Turkish government. So this is a kind of strange situation. Unless the Greek government normalizes again and applies a law. So, to answer your first question, I said that of the Muslim minority of Thrace, you have to show the certificate of exemption from the population exchange that your grandfather or mother had. So, who judges, who decides, makes a decision about this? So me, let's say, I'm a Muslim I'm a Syrian Muslim from Thessaloniki. As a refugee, I want to settle in Thrace. Do I have the right to attend the special community Muslim schools? The opposite. Or if I'm someone who, from this community again, outside Thrace, want to get married in Thrace, do have the right to get a divorce through the Sharia law court. So it goes case by case. And in the rare cases who had these questions was either an administrative body that said what I said also, that ancestry counts, or the Mufti himself saying that, okay, you have or you don't have the right, you don't belong to the community here. So the most important, the most complicated issues are the mixed marriages, because we have a few ones. Yes. A migrant Muslim getting married to a Muslim from Thrace, but they have to be settled in Thrace to have this question open. Because if they are settled outside Thrace, then outside Thrace you lose automatically the special rights of the minority. I hope.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have another question from Kyriaki. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Professor. My question is a general one. You started by saying that the ethnic affiliation matters in Greece. I'm wondering to what extent that will be reversed as soon as we start looking into New Islam in Greece, because the groups, as you illustrated very well, are not homogeneous. They come from very different parts of the world, and the story and the narrative is likely to be entirely different from the Turkish minority case. And if you do agree that ethnic affiliation no longer matters, what implication will no longer matter for these groups? What implications will this have for NTA? Because I see a great potential for NTA to develop further in Greece as soon as and as long as we have claims coming from those very diverse communities. Now, there will be resistance, but I'm just wondering to what extent, once we abolish personal autonomy and territoriality, we will see a different classification of NTA emerging. Thank you.
Ethnic affiliation matters as far as we have different antagonistic communities.
Exactly.
Okay, so, and this was visible in Greece from the beginning, not to the eyes maybe of the state, but for researchers. So we have a big difference from, let's say, the Pakistani community to the Moroccan community, the other Middle East communities, so to give an example. So what happened in the end is that they have associations that, okay, they gained the legal status of association, and then they establish their own mosque or masjid. So establishing their own masjid, automatically, of course, the Sunni, let's say, hall of prayer, but it was only for Pakistanis, or only for Bangladeshis, or only for Syrians. And then the state, by creating this administration council for the mosque of Athens, and saying that all communities would participate in this, which of course is an absurdity because you cannot have all communities participating in this. So there was a kind of selection. And then the candidates were coming from communities. Mm-hmm. All of them were Sunni Muslims, of course. But finally, that's why it's important. And finally, I'm pretty sure that the Greek administration preferred, this is someone who is have a mild profile, politically speaking, blah, 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 and then goes through these bilateral relations and maybe the authorities of the state, of the key state of this community, to reassure that we don't have a problem of extremism or whatever. So there are other underlying issues behind. I mean, first layer is religion that unifies all communities. Then we have national communities, which are visible because they have associations. And then you have other matters. That's why I say, even in New Islam, ethnicity matters. So, regarding the second part of your question, I would say that we have universal human rights, okay, dealing with religion. And then you have positive obligations from the state, or you have, let's say, negative obligation to tolerate whatever a community wants to do. So here the positive obligations is a key element, because the positive obligation is to grant, to offer something with cost. So a mosque, a cemetery. And here the state has to deal with this kind of non-territorial autonomy, because if you have Muslim communities all over Greece or all over the state, they have to open cemeteries or prayer halls. So here you have an overlapping of fundamental human rights with non-territorial autonomy. Okay, a step behind maybe non-territorial autonomy, but still there's a tendency, as you said, there's a tendency to cover this. But it's not all human rights that can cover this. There's a positive obligation by the state. Let's say we can take an example that does not exist in Greece. What if a community asks, demands, or requires a special Islamic education in a school? And then we start again to have this discussion. We have huge problems to have a mosque finally, or some masjid with a special permit, and we don't have any cemetery yet outside Thrace and Rhodes. So that's why it's very, very complicated to understand when we have a non-territorial autonomy, when we have general human rights, and what's the meaning after all? Why do we have to have where's the borderline between these? I don't have an answer, but I think it's a tendency.
Yes,
Just to understand.
I know. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have another question from the audience? No? If I can ask one shortly. You said about the Tsitselikis and then the rulings of the Human Rights Court, then that a person belonging to certain religious group can opt out from special protection. But if the person wants to have it, can he go abstain or opt out, or it's a once for all status lost?
I said this, sorry, to opt out, opt-in, you have a special framework, right?
Yeah, so for example, if I don't want to be applied to that law, but then later on, can I have applied or not? Can I choose whether I want to be applied or not?
You revert.
In an opposite way, let's say.
Yes, I think the answer is yes. The difficult issue was to opt out at least once. But if you want to opt in again,
Okay.
let's say at the same time you send your kid to the community school, but at the same time to get a divorce before a civil court, you can do it.
Okay.
So you can do it whatever you want. So this is what the Court of Strasbourg said, and this is according to the constitutional theory also.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much
Okay,
for
thank
your
you.
wonderful presentation. I don't think that we have another participant online. No. We don't have the last panelist. So this will be end of our panel. Thank you very much for the both participants, and I hope we will see you in person.
Is there
Next
no
time, for
other?
sure.
I have another question if
Oh.
there's no other presentation.
Okay. Professor Dolsky wants to use his right to ask another question.
Sorry to abuse the time, but I thought there is another panelist, so I was
No.
refraining from additional question. But since there is no other presenter, I hope we can spend another 5 minutes. I don't know if I got it right, Konstantinos, but you mentioned that these different communities of Syrians, Moroccans, and others have established their associations. Is that right? And these associations, like NGOs, have been recognized by the Greek state? Yeah. So, how do you then assess this situation with immigrants having the right to do that, whereas Turkish minority cannot do that, and not to mention the other unspoken minorities of Greece who cannot do that? How is this inconsistency possible within the legal system? I know there's political reasons behind it, but how, in legal terms, how is it possible to have it?
The answer, look, there are plenty of associations by the Muslims of Thrace, more than 200. But those who used the term Turkish in their title were not allowed to get the status of association. So it's a pure political and ideological reason that led the judges to ban the application and saying this contradicts or this would lead to upheaval among the society.
But this is what I'm saying. How can they allow Moroccan in the title of an association and then discriminate Turkish and
Ivan,
black,
this is my
whatever?
question too. Legally speaking, this is my question too, but everybody, if I were the judge, okay, this is absolutely illegal. Absolutely illegal. That's why they won easily the Court of Strasbourg. And what happened is that the case came back to Greece with the obligation by the courts to enroll these cases.
Yes.
Okay, the associations. And you know what happened? They denied again from the first grade to the third grade, and the High Court a month ago said again the same thing, that we cannot enroll these associations because they use the term Turkish in their title. So this is going to lead us to, I don't know what. So we have a denial even to implement the European Convention of Human Rights. So what here is the core element of the political ideological issue that the judge, the high judges and the government deny to accept the existence of any Turkish thing in Greece.
Yeah.
And if you go deeper into the discussion with them, they will say we don't want to see Cyprus to be reproduced again. So there's a fear, of course. It's a huge discussion if Turkey would invade Thrace because there is an association named Turkish. So, but it's the absurdity and the impasse of the stagnation, the whole discussion goes there. I mean,
so can I then assume from what you explained perfectly that the Greek state fears the minorities which are in some way indigenous and does not fear the incoming ethnic minorities of migrants of recent times?
So reverse the discourse and the feelings here to what is happening in the rest of Europe. Always there is a kind of post-Ottoman syndrome. Being Greece the borderline between the Christian Europe and the Ottoman Empire, let's say. That the relations with Turkey is always in a very, very fragile position. The Cyprus problem has not been resolved. No, this kind of discussion. So the only fear, of course, is that Taliban comes to Greece with migrants or refugees, or a kind of extremism. But this discussion is very, very low level. I mean, the main concern is always not to name the Turkish minority Turkish. Because everybody calls in private discussions the Turks of Thrace, but nobody dares to name them or to have an association with the name Turkish.
Thank you very much for this inspiring and very important discussion we had this afternoon, well, noontime. So thanks again for your time.